Hey everybody, I'm Dave with Growing the Home Garden. Today we are going to talk about several things that you should do before your first frost comes to your area. These are easy to do things that will both save you money and bring you a lot of enjoyment from your garden next spring. So let's go take a look. Now, one thing I want to do before the frost comes is to take some really good cuttings of this Coleus and this pineapple sage. Both plants have done really well, and as you can see, there's all kinds of bumblebees and little tiny bees that are going all over this pineapple sage, which blooms prolifically in the fall. But the Coleus is also something that I want to propagate. Both of these are perennials that are typically treated as annuals, but you can grow them again year over year over year because they are perennials. Now with Coleus, it's one of the most easy plants that you could ever propagate. You just need a glass of water, take a good cutting, something like that is excellent. Strip off all the bottom leaves and we'll just toss them out into the yard. They will compost in place. Create a cutting about like this. Sometimes pinch the middle. That tip bud right there, if you pinch that, will cause all the energy to go back down into the plant, which makes it start to root a little bit better. And then we'll pop it into a little jar of water. And we can watch that for a little while. Once it's got some roots, we can pot those up into a nice planter inside the house over the winter, enjoy it as a house plant, and then plant it out in the garden in the spring. Now with the pineapple sage, I'm going to look for a stalk that is not blooming. I'd prefer to not have spent the energy on that particular area. And so I'm going to come back over here and we'll give it a snip. And we'll treat it just the same way as we did the Coleus a moment ago. We'll strip off the lower leaves, just like that. Enjoy the fragrance of it. It smells like pineapple. You can use this in your tea and different things, just like that. So we leave about 2 leaves, and then we'll set it into the jar of water, just like that. So why do we cut off the leaves or pull off the leaves off of the cuttings? That is mainly so that the plant can exert its energy into forming roots down here and is not worrying about trying to maintain these extra leaves that it really doesn't need during this process. So we're going to pinch back all of those leaves except for the top couple and leave it like that. This way it exerts all its energy into forming those roots for us. And so here are our pineapple sage cuttings that we just took. Hopefully in about a week or so, maybe 10 days, we'll start to see little nubs of roots forming on the stems. We are going to do something to help it along. I've got some willow water in the house that I was using for rooting some willow cuttings. And I can just pour a little bit of that water into this cup every few days as this depletes. And that will infuse it with a bit of a rooting hormone that the willows are giving off as they are trying to root. So it's a good way to use willows in the garden, and you can find out more about that in the video that I'll post a link to up there, and I'll put one in the description as well. And so another plant that we can take cuttings of now and just put in a glass of water is basil. Basil does great if you put it in a glass of water, get it rooted over the winter, and then plant it back outdoors next year. That it goes so much faster than growing from seed, and plus you're not having to spend extra money on going and buying a plant. So there's a lot of advantages, and you do it exactly the same way as what we did for the Coleus and what we did for the pineapple sage. You just take a small cutting, something about like that right there, take off the lower leaves and pop it in a jar of water. Now what you can do is eat those leaves or use them in your cooking, and you're ready to go for dinner as well as next spring with your cuttings. So another thing I like to do before the frost comes is to transplant some pepper plants so that I can bring them indoors and save them for next year. My goal is not necessarily to create peppers that I can enjoy over the winter, although that could happen. But my main goal is to have an already grown plant that I can put back outdoors when everything is safe for it. So you'll note here I've got 2 plants, one here on the right and left, and they are both still producing peppers. I probably don't want them to do that. That's a nice looking pepper. I can go ahead and eat that like it is, but I don't want them to be exerting extra energy into producing these peppers. So that's one thing I'm going to do here, and I'm actually going to pull off anything that I think is somewhat detrimental to the plant. So we've got a lot of these little ones. You also notice that it is starting to flower. So it's exerting energy in that. Peppers, tomato plants are two plants that, among many, that are actually called, they have perfect flowers. Now, perfect flowers have male and female parts, and so they will self-pollinate. You don't have to have additional plants in there or insects to get them to do that. Just a little bit of a jiggle of the plant is enough to create that fertilization process that you need for creating fruit. So it is very possible that during the winter time we could end up with some peppers to grow, and I've done that before. A lot of these leaves, you see here, we've got some stressed out leaves, so I'm going to pinch them off and get rid of them. Put my peppers down for a moment so I have free hand. And we're just going to pull these yellow ones off. It's got a little bit of stress because I transplanted it and it's been very dry, so it's probably not getting watered as much as it needs to. So I'm going to take a little bit off. Now the other thing we can do is we can prune it back a little bit to help it get a little bit bushier. And this is kind of hard to do sometimes because you just don't want to prune off parts of your pepper plants. But we are going to do that in order to help it succeed in the long run. So we'll put it about that size for this one. Look, we got some little ones. We'll just go ahead and snip them away and let this pepper plant regrow, and we will bring it indoors in a few days. Now what typically happens in the summer is we get really, really hot and then tomato production slows down. So what you end up with is kind of a resurgence after temperatures start to drop of tomatoes. They start to form up again, flower again, and germinate. Tomatoes do not like actually producing fruit when they're above 90 so degrees. Ideal temperatures are probably in the upper 70s and 80s. Now as you can see, we've got some green tomatoes that are forming right here. So one of the things we're going to do right before the frost, we're going to give these as much time as possible to grow, is we can pick them and start to get them inside so that they can begin the process of ripening. The other thing you can do is you can cover them for a few days during the frost. Most of these frosts are going to be in the light area around the 30 degrees, so we could potentially end up with days or weeks afterwards with no frost. So you can extend your harvest all the way to the end of October, maybe the beginning of November here in Tennessee. It's probably different in other areas though. But of course, if you're here in the South, one of the favorite things people do is make fried green tomatoes, which are delicious. So that could be an option too if you don't want to wait for them to ripen up on your countertop. Now another problem that you want to resolve before it becomes an actual problem are insects that are nesting in your potted plants. So I have a Coleus plant that I want to bring in and save for next year that's in a pot. And what we're going to do is we're going to flood out the pot to get rid of any insects that might potentially be inside that. And it's very simple. Just get a waterproof container, like in this case here, it's just a plastic tub. Get some water. Put your plant that you want to chase out the insects from in there, and all you're going to do is water the plant. And we are actually flooding this plant with way more water than it could potentially use. The idea is that that whole pot gets so saturated and the bottom area holds the water down there that any insects will push out and not go back into the pot. And ideally they'll probably drown here and then we'll be done with those insects. And so once we've done that a few times, we can bring that indoors nice and safe and not worry about the bugs coming in. So I really appreciate you watching. If you found these tips useful or helpful, hit the like button, subscribe, and we'll catch you next time on Growing the Home Garden. Thanks for watching.